The numbers here at the channel have almost quadrupled in the last 6 months, and there's a lot of new people that have joined the channel after we had finished the issue with the Fitzgerald and the McCain. I brought up this picture just because I wanted to show the Fitzgerald without the damage. I was tired of looking at it with the giant gouge taken out of the side. I found something, and I've debated about whether to put it out or not, because the families have been through enough, and I think it's very, very clear from both reports that something's being hidden. Something major is being hidden from the American people, and a story came out on USNI that might be the most terrifying thing that I've seen in a long time. It's this one. Now, I know most wouldn't look at this and think it was any big deal until you realize what it means. When was the last time any of these people in the military of this age picked up a pen and a piece of paper and did anything official? Almost everything is done electronically, whether it would be on a tablet, with an app, the phone, or the systems aboard these ships. Paper charts? Really? I remember in the report that once the Fitzgerald had stabilized itself after the collision, that they had to use paper charts to navigate, and very few people on board knew how. See, what they're saying here is this: we are going to have our surface warfare officers literally put down with paper and pen the things that they've done, their time at sea, all of these events, and then from that hard copy record, we are then going to create a database. No mention in this article of an app, no mention in this article about any of this, some new database being created electronically. It tells me two things. The first thing that it tells me is that every bit of information that the Fitzgerald had electronically was wiped in that event. And number two, it tells me that the Navy doesn't believe their own systems are secure, that this information can be gleaned at will by our enemies. I believe it was just an Air Force officer that retired and said the U.S. is no longer safe. The U.S. homeland is no longer safe. I should have brought up that article, but one of the things I wanted to cover today to back up what I'm saying is this. This was the original map. I know people have seen the other one, but this was the original big map that people got tired of looking at. This is the movements of the container ship, ACX Crystal. This was the first record of events that anyone got. And when the Navy came out and did its press conference, it sounded exactly like the Navy was using the information from Vessel Finder, that they didn't have an independent record of events of their own. This press conference, the Admiral in charge of the 7th Fleet 3 times misstated the time of the event at 3 different times. This man was a decorated fighter pilot. This guy wasn't Mr. Not Attention to Detail. That means one thing, and one thing only, is that they had no independent information of their own other than from that phone call that they got from somebody aboard the ship to verify anything, that the ship was basically a giant metal rowboat when they brought it into port. and I'm going to show you guys something that I hadn't caught in the movements of the ship and the clock. Now, I'm going to go over some old information real quick for you guys. I know a lot of the guys who've been here before know what I'm talking about, but I just want to clear all this up so nobody asks dumb questions in the comments. All right, up here in the corner, this is a timestamp. The time that you're seeing is GMT. Local time of the event here is different than this time. This correlates to, right now, we are looking at, it says 1745. Of course, military time, that would be 5:45 p.m., but that's GMT. Local time here, that's 2:45 in the morning. Okay, so when we go back through this, you're going to be looking at from about 1 o'clock in the morning local time through about 3 o'clock. So, just wanted to cover that. Now, item number 2, we're going to be playing this at quarter speed. You're going to be seeing these numbers jump up in 5-second intervals. And then at about the 1744 mark, it's going to change to 10-second intervals. That never happens. All soulless vessels report on 10-second intervals no matter what. This is what got the channel down the road with the transponder being monkeyed with. And if you want to go get yourself caught up on the transponder issues, just go to my channel, look that stuff up. I am sure a lot of people down in the comments can direct you to the right videos for that. So now that we're there, there's something that happens up here that I didn't notice. And I just wanted to go back and start this over for you guys. Now, I know this is a lot of information, but I need to go over it all first before we start moving the ship around. The video is 4 minutes and 29 seconds long. Okay, now I've done all the hard math on how they've taken 5 hours and some change and condensed it down into 4.5 minutes. Basically, the ratio is 70-1. For every second you see transpire here, 70 seconds transpired in real life. I hope I've done my math right. It sounds like it's right. So when you see the giant pause, you have to multiply that by 70 in real life, which will tell you something pretty amazing. Now, let's go back to here. All right, we are at about 2 minutes before the collision. The ACX crystal was here on a course of 90 degrees, and at 120, about here, it had made a turn up to about 70 degrees. This turn, clearly, when you look at the reports, was not noticed by the Fitzgerald. The reason, of course, they didn't notice it is because this thing is using a Class B transponder, which has a very limited range. I don't even know if they had seen the ACX crystal if they were just looking at it with AIS. Originally, it was reported by the Navy that the AIS wasn't being used. But then, when we finally got people under oath in hearings, they absolutely confirmed that it was being used, and that it was used to determine the location of the crystal by the guys down in CIC. Another argument for another day. But the point is this. We're going to run this forward at a quarter speed. So I want to show you guys something. Now, as I play this forward, as you can see, it's going in 5-second intervals. We've covered this before. Now, here's the time of the accident. Right here, 16:30. Now, the ship doesn't move, but the clock keeps going, meaning that, and I'm going to pause this real quick to explain this, that clock kept moving, the ship didn't move, and the second counter down here kept moving. So the video wasn't paused. What this meant is that the ACX crystal was still sending information up to the satellite. It was just reporting the same location over and over and over and over again with no change. And the video was moving forward. I know this sounds confusing, but what happens later literally would mean that time itself had stopped. Because I can't think of any other possible explanation for it. Here, it hadn't. Not at this moment in time. Because the video keeps moving, the counter keeps moving, but the ship stays in place. All that means is that the ship is in one place, the transponder is functioning just like it should, even though it's a Class B transponder, and it's just not updating any new position data. Okay, so as we play forward, okay, we have a jump there. Once again, the clock up here continues to move. The clock down here on the video continues to move. Now remember, we're moving at quarter speed here, just so we don't zip through all of these different points. It's still reporting data because we're getting new timestamps. And it jumps here. So we have these two major jumps here where we didn't get any new data. Now, strangely enough, this point right here, where the ship is, if the crystal had not made that 120 turn to 70 degrees from 90, this is where they would have been. You can draw that line straight back to where they were, which is very, very odd that they were on a line and then made this turn to hit and then returned almost to that exact same line. Which means that I think we had two different things going on here. This representation down here is reporting as the ACX crystal transponder when the actual ACX crystal was someplace totally different. Now, we're going to fast forward. So instead of stopping, slowing down, turning around and coming right here, which it could have done very easily, it speeds up and motors away. The original explanation for this, of course, was that the crystal didn't realize that it hit anything. But then it came out later that that wasn't the case, that the captain of the crystal saw the destroyer, tried to flash its lights at it, and tried to steer very hard at the last minute to not hit it. Which means very clearly it absolutely did know it hit something. And here it is steaming away, speeding away as fast as can be. Allegedly, this is the case of the ACX crystal here. Remember, up here, when you see this jump in 5-second intervals, this means it's not a Class A transponder that's sending up the signal. It's a Class B. And you can look up those rates. There's a chart for it, and it's in other videos. Now, oddly enough, of course, everybody's very familiar, at least those who watch the investigation, with the Baichi Bridge. See this ship right here? Watch what happens when the ACX crystal goes by it. It hasn't moved this entire time, as if it's anchored out here in this incredibly busy shipping channel. Never seen anything like it. It's just sitting there, not moving, and then as the ACX crystal passes it, it kicks off its transponder. And you'll see it disappear here in just a second. There it goes. Now this Kiso is a high-speed transport. The Miho over here would have been literally in proximity directly to the Fitzgerald, and would have easily been able to ascertain that there was a ship in distress. Now, I'm going to speed up real quick, just to 2x, to show you how maneuverable, by the way, this giant lumbering cargo ship is. Now here is the 2:20 in the morning mark. Of course, this says 17:20. That's GMT, as I explained before. This is when the crew of the ACX Crystal allegedly called in the accident. Now we assume they're here. I don't think this track is them. I think it's a ship that is reporting this. It might be some guy sitting behind a desk 1,000 miles away, because we've shown how that's possible. How they can create spoofed ship tracks. Now, here's where things get absolutely mind-bogglingly stupid. All right, this alleged ACX crystal comes to this point right here, returns to the scene of the crime, so to speak, right? This is where it's going to get weird. I need you guys to watch this clock up here, and this clock here, and the ship simultaneously. It's a hard thing to do. I'm going to slow this down to a quarter. But at the 17:44 and some change mark, the clock here stops. The ship doesn't move, and the clock stops for nearly 3 seconds of video time, which, like I said, 70 to 1. So that would be a 70, so 210 seconds. So for 3.5 minutes, this transponder went down. And when it comes back up, there's no difference in the time. There's no giant 3-minute jump in the time. And it starts reporting in a completely different way. It reports in the 10-second. I'm going to go ahead and play this forward. Here comes the stop. There's the stop. See how this keeps moving down here? But that's still stopped. And look how it jumped. And now look, every 10 seconds, the ship still hasn't moved. Now watch what happens. It goes from 8 knots, 240 degrees, 242 degrees. See how everything else is still moving around it? And it's sitting there? Now it's back strangely at 90 degrees, 3 knots, with this giant gap in time. I don't think the ACX Crystal ever sailed away from this. Honest to God. I think that ship hit the Fitzgerald. The Fitzgerald had been zapped, dead in the water. We have proof for that too. And something happened during this hour. I made this allegation before and I got laughed at because I talked about boarding parties and all this kind of stuff. I'm telling you, something happened in this hour that the Navy doesn't want you to know about. And this ship didn't go flying down range and come back. The track did. Somebody created a big spoof here that to explain that hour. The hour that, strangely enough, both the crew of the Fitzgerald and the crew of the Crystal simultaneously, independently of each other, allegedly, waited the exact same amount of time to each contact their authorities, respective authorities, the Japanese Coast Guard for the Crystal and Desron for the Fitzgerald. Something happened in this hour. And this track is proof of it. And if this article is any indication, I will bet you dollars to donuts right now that the injury to that captain had nothing to do with the accident. that there were people that got aboard that ship. And this is what the Navy does not want you to know. This whole story about the officer that was in charge at the time, that Sarah Kopic, screaming into the radio for 3 hours. For 3 hours, really? And you can read her testimony where she says this. She got the coordinates of this event tattooed on her wrist, apparently. And now the Navy is fixing the problem by going to paper and pen. It's insanely frightening. So, anyway, we will leave it there. And I'm sure the comment section is going to be great on this one. But like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time.